So recently I talked about some of my favorite manga. I thought it would only be right to talk about some of the more recent stuff that I've either fallen in love with, found extremely interesting, or genuinely surprised me. A lot of this stuff is more so within the recent years and has definitely left most likely a pretty massive impression on me and something that I truly appreciate. So with that said, a lot of these may seem pretty obvious, but there could also be a handful that are rather surprising. And the first one that I want to start off with is probably the most impactful one and something that genuinely surprised me to my core was Chainsaw Man. I don't think I can necessarily put into accurate words just how much I've fallen in love with this series. There's something so unique and special and charming about it that I absolutely love. And it's not something that's completely changing the world or revolutionizing the manga industry, but for me, the experience has been unmatched. It's such an enjoyable thing to witness, and reading it week by week, that experience was unimaginable. It's something that I've only ever felt once before, and it was when I was reading and making a lot of content surrounding Tokyo Ghoul. So Chainsaw Man quickly grabbed me and became the pinnacle of all of the recent stuff that I've read. I genuinely appreciate it, and I couldn't be more excited for Chainsaw Man Part 2. I absolutely adore making content on it, and I understand the story may not be for everyone, but I would 100% recommend it to people if they haven't checked it out. So coming off the back of Chainsaw Man, of course, I had to read Fire Punch, which is by the same author, Fujimoto. And as much as I have read his stories backwards, with Fire Punch coming out before Chainsaw Man, I was genuinely surprised with it, and it gave me a better understanding on how Fujimoto as an author tends to write his stories, how he constructs them and build them in these very methodical layers. To put simply, on the surface, his stories seem extremely chaotic and out of control, but underneath there is so much wit and charm and passion and depth that goes a mile long deep that you never truly expect. And the only way that you can kind of grasp that depth, or at least understand it or make it somewhat important or valuable, is if you go looking for it, because it's right there in the open. You have all the tools and all the information at your disposal, but it doesn't try to force feed it to you. It doesn't try to hold your hand down this path of understanding characters or their emotions. Instead, it wants you to find it on your own. This is more so indicative to Chainsaw Man now, but Fire Punch was definitely a little bit more on the nose. It masked everything with this very nihilistic, depressive nature that was super overwhelming, but brilliantly handled. And while I do have my complaints surrounding the ending and how out of control it all truly went, the ideas and the methods behind it were so intriguing to me. I'm genuinely curious on how Fujimoto thinks as a person when it comes to writing his stories because of Fire Punch, and something that a lot of authors tend to avoid. Whereas for him, it seems like he genuinely didn't really care and just wanted to write whatever he thought was interesting, which at the end of the day, it definitely was. Consistency wise, however, it was very jarring and a little bit loose and once again out of control. But still, Fire Punch, a very enjoyable experience, and one that I recommend people reading if you enjoy Chainsaw Man. So this one shouldn't be surprising, Jujutsu Kaisen. I definitely think this manga took a lot of people by surprise. There is a lot of beautiful things within it, a lot of enjoyable things to grab onto and truly get lost in the lore, in the abilities, in the characters, and just enjoy everything that it's giving. But for a long time, especially when it first was introduced into the scene, it was very slept on. It was more so of a sleeper hit. It took quite a long time to build up momentum and attraction towards it before it all peaked rather massively. And with that, Akutami has managed to capitalize on so many incredible concepts and themes and characters to truly create this engaging experience. And it's crazy to think now that the reception that it has, being so massive, is only going to get 10 times bigger. Once we see that anime focus on Gojo's flashback or even the Shibuya arc, that's when things will truly peak. That's when you see success and numbers truly come forward, if, of course, everything goes well. Now, I'm not the biggest fan when it comes to comedy, but I do enjoy it when I feel like it's done well, or when it aligns somewhat with my own humor. It's not a surprise to people when I say that I like the more quote-unquote edgy or mature themed series, stuff that feels a lot more authentic and realistic. It's stuff that I can genuinely connect to, and I appreciate it, especially because of how difficult those mature topics are to write. But I'd be lying if I said there isn't some comedy series that I wholeheartedly enjoy, and this is one of them, Spy X Family. I think for me, this was the biggest surprise because when it first came out, a lot of people weren't really sure about it. It was a very oddly timed thing. All of these mature-esque stories coming out that were very chaotic or over the top or dark or even a little bit depressing, and then you have Spy X Family that definitely has its serious notes. It has a very healthy foundation of two nations on the brink of war, but it doesn't overshadow the comedy that's on top of it. It doesn't overshadow the characters or their emotions or the small sprinkle of fantasy that comes through within it. Everything is weaved perfectly with one another to create such a beautiful experience. And to say that Spy X Family has charm is an understatement. Definitely early to say, but Spy X Family has something that could easily be iconic, blending all of these themes and concepts and these atmospheres with all of these likable and lovable characters to create a memorable reading experience. Wholeheartedly, I would recommend everyone to at least give this a chance. It's relatively short, but you'd be surprised how quick you fall in love with everything that it does. So both of these series are relatively pretty new, Kaiju number 8, Phantom Seer, but both are doing things rather well. They're very enjoyable experiences, especially for me, Kaiju number 8. You would think Godzilla and Japan's love for kaijus would have already been a thing regarding manga, and a series fully focused around it. And while there has been a number of kaiju related manga series, none have truly taken off the ground, at least in the way that Kaiju number 8 is. It has somewhat captured Japan by storm and is truly doing very good numbers, and it's still very early within its story, only having, I believe, 26 odd chapters and releasing only 3 chapters a month. I'm very happy to see it doing so well. I enjoy it. As simplistic on the surface that it is, it has a lot of directions that it could go in, and in a very beautiful and depthly type of way. Phantom Seer is in a similar position for me. I'm hoping that it does well. It's definitely playing on that Japanese lore and mythology that Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer has reintroduced or re-sparked, so the interest is there for it, and it has a very captivating type of artwork that truly draws you in. So I'd be truly happy to see both of these series thrive and blow up in their own respective manner. Now, the 2 series that I have here are by the same individuals that done Bastard, and that is Sweet Home and Pigpen. Sweet Home, surprisingly, was my very first manhwa, and it was beyond a great introduction to the medium, how they handle storytelling, the paneling, the artwork, how everything comes across, and what you truly get. I think Sweet Home is a great way to be introduced into the medium that isn't necessarily overwhelming. Yes, it is gory, it is dark, and focuses on things in a way that may turn off a lot of people. So I genuinely appreciate Sweet Home of giving me such a warm welcome and a great experience within the manhwa industry. And then Pigpen, which is actually their newest series, going in a completely different direction. It's something that they haven't really done before, but still playing on their very massive strong suit of creating an alluring and addicting mystery. Pigpen may feel like something that you've read before, but with how intense it becomes, how obnoxious and mind-boggling and chaotic things can get, you come to question a lot of different things. Your interpretation of things may be completely wrong. Your interpretation of a character may be completely wrong. And Pigpen loops that currently. It plays to it as an advantage and truly tries to manipulate you as a reader into not knowing what is going on, trying to constantly confuse you and perceive characters and emotions and the actions that they take so many different ways that it's hard to put your thumb on what is truly going on, and it makes it inherently suspenseful. So jumping back to comedy, one that I didn't think I necessarily would enjoy as much as I did was Kaguya-sama. This series definitely was a surprise, because I remember reading it and I thought it was interesting and then never really came back to it. But then when I gave it a legitimate chance and I had a decent amount of chapters that I could finally go through, I found it engaging and enjoyable and very witty. The characters are very self-aware of the humor that goes on, and the emotions behind the romance within it surprisingly feels genuinely authentic. If you're used to romance stories, I think Kaguya-sama is perfect for you because it takes what is pretty much already loved and appreciated within that genre and spins it off and evolves it in its own direction. Oddly enough, somewhat similar to Chainsaw Man, it has its own quirk and charm within a genre that can easily be very overly saturated. If you enjoy romance series with comedy and you want it to feel a little bit more genuine, I think Kaguya-sama is definitely worthwhile. And last but not least, Hell's Paradise. I think for a lot of people this series went completely under the radar. It didn't necessarily get much promotion, it was rarely pushed towards the public, there wasn't much marketing for it, but for the people that did read it, truly valued what Hell's Paradise was trying to do. There was so much lore and depth and interesting concepts being utilized that were mashed together in a way that was so appealing. So many different religions and cultures and ideologies all swirling together to create this very odd and overwhelming presence. But they took that and directly linked it to the island, to the artwork, to the things being showcased, and they were all building and stemming off one another in this massive circuit. And because of all its lore and all of these identities swirling together, it casts this uniqueness, which is very easy to indulge within. I'm undoubtedly excited for the anime that it's getting and praying that it's well handled. I feel like it deserves a lot more attention, and this is the best way to do it. So that is it. That is a list of some of the more recent manga that I've either fallen in love with or deeply appreciate or enjoy, even some that surprised me. But I think the real question is, out of my list, what would be one of your favorites? More specifically, what is your list? What are some of the newer series that you've come in contact with that surprised you and that you've fallen in love with or you absolutely adore? I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Drink plenty of water, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.